The smell of turkey and disappointment filled my childhood home as I set down my overnight bag in the familiar entryway. The walls were lined with the same family photos they'd displayed for years, but noticeably absent were any pictures of me from the past 5 years. Not surprising, considering my family saw those years as my lost period. I'm Madison Foster, though my family had taken to calling me the Dropout ever since I left Stanford in my junior year. At 28, I was the black sheep who'd thrown away a promising pre-med track to chase what my father called computer nonsense. Madison. My mother's voice carried from the kitchen, sweet but strained. You're early, dear. We weren't expecting you until dinner. I checked my watch. 2:47 p.m. Thought I'd help with preparations, Mom. She emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron, her eyes automatically scanning my appearance. Jeans, a simple sweater, sneakers. I could see her mental calculation. Another disappointing outfit from her disappointing daughter. That's thoughtful, she said, though her tone suggested otherwise. Your brother and Jessica are already here. And your cousin Trevor flew in from New York this morning. Of course Trevor was here. The golden child who'd followed the family script perfectly. Harvard Law, partnership at a prestigious firm, marriage to the right kind of woman. Everything I'd failed to achieve. The living room buzzed with the familiar energy of family judgment disguised as concern. My brother David sat in Dad's old armchair, his wife Jessica perched on the arm, both looking like they'd stepped out of a catalog for successful young professionals. Trevor stood by the fireplace, gesticulating as he told some story about his latest courtroom victory. Madison. David's voice boomed with false enthusiasm. Look who finally crawled out of. Where are you living now? Still Mom's basement. The room erupted in polite laughter. Jessica covered her mouth delicately, while Trevor grinned like he'd just heard the joke of the century. I have my own place, I replied calmly, settling into the corner of the sofa. A small apartment downtown. How small? Jessica asked with the kind of concern that wasn't really concern. These days with rent prices. It's fine, I said, taking a sip of the coffee Mom had pressed into my hands. Suits my needs. Trevor joined the conversation, loosening his expensive tie. Madison, I have to ask, and please don't take this the wrong way, but what exactly are you doing these days? Career-wise, I mean. Here it came. The annual interrogation disguised as family interest. I work in software development, I said simply. David leaned forward. Like, fixing computers? More like building applications and systems. Ah. He nodded as if he understood, though clearly he didn't. Is there money in that? I mean real money. I thought about the 7-figure deals I'd closed in the past month, about the company valuation that had hit $2.8 billion last quarter, about the acquisition offers I'd been fielding from tech giants. But I just smiled. I get by. Dad emerged from his study, still wearing his reading glasses, holding what looked like financial documents. At 64, Richard Foster commanded respect in every room he entered. He'd built Foster & Associates into one of the region's most successful accounting firms, and he expected his children to follow similarly traditional paths to success. Madison, he nodded curtly. Good to see you. You too, Dad. He settled into his chair, the unofficial signal that serious family discussion was about to begin. Now that everyone's here, I thought we should discuss some family business. My stomach tightened. Family business discussions never went well for me. As you know, Dad continued, the firm has been growing steadily. David's been instrumental in expanding our corporate client base, and I'm proud to announce that he'll be taking over as managing partner next year. Everyone applauded appropriately. David beamed, Jessica squeezed his arm, and Trevor raised his coffee cup in a toast. That's wonderful news, Mom said, though she shot a quick glance at me. Both our children doing so well. The uncomfortable pause that followed was deafening. Well, Trevor said, clearly trying to fill the silence, 1 out of 2 isn't bad. More polite laughter. I maintained my smile, used to being the punchline. Madison, Dad's voice took on that tone I remembered from childhood lectures. I've been thinking about your situation. It's not too late, you know. Dr. Patterson's son is doing very well in medical device sales. I could make a call, get you an interview. That's kind of you, Dad, but I'm happy with my current work. David snorted. Happy? That's what people say when they've given up on success. David, Mom warned gently. No, Mom, someone needs to say it. David stood up, warming to his theme. Madison had everything handed to her. Stanford, pre-med track, full family support. And she threw it all away for what? To play with computers in some basement apartment. I don't live in a basement, I said quietly. Might as well, Jessica chimed in. I mean, what kind of future is there in whatever it is you do? Trevor nodded sagely. The tech bubble always bursts eventually. Remember the dot-com crash? Madison, you need to think long-term. Build something stable like David has. I looked around the room at their concerned faces, their absolute certainty that they knew what was best for me. 5 years of this. 5 years of being the family disappointment while I built something they couldn't even comprehend. You know, I said, reaching for my phone, I've been meaning to show you something. Please don't tell me you're finally on Instagram, Jessica said. Social media isn't a career, Madison. I ignored her, scrolling through my messages until I found the one I was looking for. My publicist sent this earlier. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. Publicist? Dad's eyebrows rose. What do you need a publicist for? I was about to answer when the doorbell rang. That'll be the mail, Mom said, standing. I'll just grab it. Perfect timing. I'd been tracking the delivery all week. Mom returned with an armload of mail, flipping through the usual bills and catalogs. Then she stopped, staring at something in her hands. Forbes magazine, she said, confused. We don't subscribe to Forbes. My heart rate picked up. Actually, that's probably for me. For you. David laughed. What could Forbes possibly want with? He stopped mid-sentence as Mom held up the magazine. There, on the glossy cover, was my face. Professional headshot, confident smile with the headline, The 28-year-old Dropout Who Built a billion-dollar empire. The silence that followed was absolute. Trevor's coffee cup slipped from his fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor. Jessica's mouth fell open. David's face went from smug confidence to pale confusion in seconds. Madison. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. Is this you? I stood up, walking over to take the magazine from her trembling hands. Yeah, Mom. That's me. The cover photo showed me in the sleek conference room of Nexus Dynamics, the company I'd built from nothing in my basement apartment. The tagline read, How Madison Foster Revolutionized Cloud Computing While Her Family Thought She Was Failing. This is impossible, David said, his voice cracking. This has to be some kind of mistake. I opened the magazine to the feature article. Want me to read it out loud? No one answered. They just stared. Madison Foster left Stanford in her junior year against her family's wishes, choosing to pursue what seemed like an impossible dream, revolutionizing how companies store and access data in the cloud. 5 years later, her company Nexus Dynamics has a valuation of $2.8 billion and contracts with 40% of Fortune 500 companies. Trevor sank into the nearest chair. Nexus Dynamics. I've heard of Nexus Dynamics. They handle data security for half the law firms in Manhattan. Foster's journey began in a 400-square-foot apartment she rented with her life savings. I continued reading. Working 18-hour days, she developed proprietary algorithms that would eventually become the foundation of the most secure cloud storage system in the world. Dad removed his glasses, cleaning them repeatedly. Madison, I don't understand. If this is true, why didn't you tell us? I closed the magazine, meeting his eyes. Would you have believed me? The question hung in the air like smoke. Last Christmas, I continued, when I tried to explain what I was working on, you told me to stop living in fantasy land. 2 Thanksgivings ago, when I mentioned my company had signed its first major client, you suggested I see a therapist about my delusions of grandeur. Jessica found her voice. But you dress so simply. You drive that old Honda. You live in that tiny apartment. Because that's all I need, I said. Success isn't about showing off. It's about building something meaningful. David was scrolling frantically through his phone. This says your company just acquired 2 competitors for $300 million each. Last month, I confirmed. We're expanding into Europe next quarter. Trevor looked up from his own phone, his face pale. Madison, it says here that you're worth more than all of you combined, I finished gently. Yes. Mom sank into her chair, still staring at the magazine cover. Sweetie, why didn't you share this with us? We're your family. I thought about all the family dinners where I'd been ignored or mocked. All the times they'd assumed I was failing without asking how I was actually doing. All the years of being treated like the family disappointment. Because, I said carefully, sharing requires trust. And trust requires people to listen without judgment. Dad was reading the article now, his face cycling through emotions I'd never seen before. It says you employ over 800 people. That you've revolutionized data security for government contracts. The Pentagon is my biggest client, I said. We handle classified information storage for 3 branches of the military. The room fell silent again. Outside, I could hear neighborhood kids playing in the leaves, their laughter a stark contrast to the stunned quiet inside. Madison, Trevor said slowly, I recommended Nexus Dynamics to my firm 6 months ago. You've been handling our most sensitive case files. I nodded. I know. I saw your name on the client list. You knew and you didn't say anything? Would it have changed how you treated me? He had no answer for that. Jessica was still scrolling through her phone. There are articles about you in TechCrunch, Wall Street Journal, Harvard Business Review. Madison, you're famous. I'm successful, I corrected. There's a difference. David stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. This doesn't make sense. If you're worth billions, why do you live like what? Like someone who doesn't need to prove her worth through material possessions. He turned back to face me. But the apartment, the car. The apartment is 5 blocks from my office. The car is reliable and efficient. I own what I need, not what impresses people. Mom was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her face. Oh, Madison. What have we done? You assumed, I said softly. You looked at external appearances and made judgments without asking questions. Dad closed the magazine carefully. The article mentions your philanthropy work. A foundation for underprivileged students. The Foster Education Initiative, I said. We've provided full scholarships to 200 students so far. Kids who want to pursue non-traditional paths but don't have family support. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Trevor cleared his throat. Madison, I owe you an apology. We all do. Do you? I asked. Or are you just sorry because now you know I'm successful by your definition? He flinched. That's fair. I walked to the window where David stood, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd grown up feeling like I never quite fit in. 5 years ago, I said, when I left Stanford, I tried to explain my vision to all of you. I tried to share my excitement about what I was building. But every conversation ended with you telling me I was making a mistake, that I was throwing my life away. We were trying to protect you, Mom said through her tears. From what? From following my passion? From building something revolutionary? From success? Dad stood up, walking over to where I stood. Madison, I don't know what to say. We've been terrible to you. I turned to face him. Not terrible. Just blind. How can we make this right? I thought about that question. Could this be made right? Could years of dismissal and mockery be erased by one magazine article? You can start, I said, by understanding that success comes in many forms. That intelligence isn't measured by following traditional paths. That sometimes the person you think is failing is actually succeeding beyond your comprehension. Jessica spoke up hesitantly. The article mentions you're working on something new. Some kind of quantum computing project. For the first time all day I smiled genuinely. Quantum data storage. If successful, it'll make current cloud computing look like dial-up internet. And you're doing this yourself? David asked. With a team of the brightest minds in the industry. Most of them also college dropouts, actually. Trevor laughed, but it was different now. Not mocking but amazed. Of course they are. There's something else, I said, reaching for my phone. Something I haven't told you. They waited, probably wondering what other bombshells I might drop. MIT called last week. They want to offer me an honorary doctorate. Harvard too, actually. And Stanford wants me to give the commencement speech next year. Mom started crying harder. Oh, sweetie. We've been such fools. You've been protective parents, I said gently. Misguided, maybe, but your intentions came from love. Dad picked up the Forbes magazine again, staring at my photo. You look confident here. Happy. I am happy. I love what I do. I love the problems I solve, the team I work with, the impact we're making. And we almost convinced you to give it up, he said quietly. He tried. But some dreams are too big to abandon, even for family approval. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable this time. It was contemplative, heavy with realization and regret. Madison, David said finally, would you tell us about your company? Really tell us? I want to understand what you've built. I looked around the room at their faces. No more smirks or condescending smiles. Just genuine curiosity and perhaps the beginning of respect. It started, I said, settling back into my corner of the sofa, with a simple observation about how inefficiently most companies handle data storage. For the next 2 hours I talked. Really talked for the first time in years. I explained the technology, the business model, the vision for the future. They listened without interruption, asking thoughtful questions, slowly beginning to understand the magnitude of what I'd accomplished. When I finished, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the living room. Dinner's probably ruined, Mom said, but she was smiling. We could order pizza, I suggested. Pizza sounds perfect, Dad said. Though I suspect you could afford something fancier. I laughed. I could buy the pizza place, but sometimes simple is better. As Mom called for pizza delivery, Trevor pulled me aside. Madison, I need to ask you something. That night last Christmas when I told you to stop dreaming and get realistic. I remember. I was jealous, he admitted. I've always followed the safe path, done what was expected. I've never had the courage to chase something truly ambitious. I studied his face. It's not too late, you know, to chase something bigger. At 32? With a mortgage and responsibilities. Some of my best developers are in their 40s. Experience brings perspective. He nodded thoughtfully. Maybe we could talk more about that. About your industry, the opportunities. I'd like that. The pizza arrived and we gathered around the dining room table. The same table where I'd endured years of lectures about responsible career choices. But tonight felt different. Tonight I wasn't the family disappointment. I was Madison Foster, CEO of Nexus Dynamics, featured on the cover of Forbes magazine. More importantly, I was finally seen by my family for who I really was. There's one more thing, I said as we finished eating. The article mentions I'm expanding operations. I'm looking for someone to head our new East Coast legal department. Trevor nearly choked on his pizza. Are you? Offering you a job? Only if you're interested. It would mean leaving your current firm, taking a risk, joining something unconventional. He looked at his plate, then back at me. What would I be doing? Helping to write the legal framework for technologies that don't exist yet. Negotiating contracts with governments and corporations. Building something from the ground up. That sounds... He paused, terrifying and amazing. Most worthwhile things are. David was watching this exchange with interest. What about accounting? Do billion-dollar companies need accountants? I smiled. They need CFOs. People who understand both traditional finance and the unique challenges of scaling a tech company rapidly. Are you offering me a job too? I'm offering you the chance to help build something revolutionary. If you think you can handle working for your little sister. He laughed, and for the first time in years it sounded genuine. I think I can manage that. As the evening wound down, my family walked me to the door. The same entryway where I'd arrived hours earlier as the family disappointment. Now everything had changed. Madison, Mom said, hugging me tightly, I'm so proud of you. Not because of the money or the magazine covers, but because you had the courage to follow your vision when no one believed in you. Even when your own family didn't believe in you, Dad added quietly. I'm sorry for that. We're all sorry. I hugged them back, feeling years of tension and hurt beginning to dissolve. We're family. We'll figure it out. As I drove home in my reliable Honda Civic, I thought about the path that had led me here. The lonely nights coding in my tiny apartment. The rejections from investors who didn't understand my vision. The family dinners where I'd sat silent while they planned my life for me. But mostly I thought about tomorrow. About the quantum computing project that could change everything. About the team of brilliant misfits I'd assembled. About the future we were building together. My phone buzzed with a text from my publicist. Forbes article already trending on social media. Interview requests pouring in. You ready for this? I smiled, typing back, ready. The next morning I woke up to 47 missed calls and 200 plus unread emails. Word was spreading fast. By noon, 3 major news outlets wanted interviews and my company's stock price had jumped 15%. But the message that made me smile was a simple text from David. Reviewed Nexus Dynamics financial reports. Holy shit, Madison. When can we talk about that CFO position? Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's success so complete, so undeniable, that it transforms not just how others see you but how they see themselves. My family would never again assume that unconventional meant unsuccessful. They'd learn to look deeper, to ask questions, to consider that maybe, just maybe, the person they'd written off as a failure was actually the most successful person they knew. Me. I was just getting started. The dropout who disappointed her family was about to change the world.